My wife and I live in a different state from my family, but we often travel back to my home state for special family occasions, such as birthdays and Christmas. My wife is a 22-year military veteran who was discharged for medical reasons. She has been diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety, and depression, and has spent several stints in psychiatric hospitals. She was prescribed an assistance service dog named Daisy, who we trained with the help of a registered organization. Daisy is formally qualified and certified. She accompanies us wherever we go, including interstate flights, hospital visits, and stays at psychiatric units. My family is aware of this and mostly supportive. However, during our last visit for my niece's 21st birthday, both my sister and niece questioned whether Daisy would be attending the party with my wife. I confirmed that Daisy would be there since my wife struggles in loud and crowded environments. My niece listed several reasons why Daisy shouldn't go, such as loud music, balloons, and lots of people. I assured her that Daisy is fine with all of these, and that my family already knows this because they are familiar with her calm temperament. After my niece, my sister also approached me and made similar suggestions, hinting that it would be better if Daisy didn't attend. I simply responded that if my wife feels she needs Daisy, then Daisy will be there. My wife has been able to do small activities without Daisy, but for big events like parties, shopping centers, and restaurants, Daisy always accompanies her. The party came and went, and my wife managed to sit through the evening with Daisy by her side. Some people approached her during the evening, and most of them didn't even notice Daisy was there. I danced throughout the night, but periodically sat down next to my wife to check on her. After the party, we stayed at my sister's house for a few days, and the topic of her son's wedding came up. Once again, my sister asked if my wife would bring Daisy. I confirmed that it was likely since the wedding would involve lots of people, loud noises, and a crowded environment. Once again, it was suggested that Daisy wouldn't be suitable for the event due to crowded tables, and the hope that my wife would be able to dance without Daisy. I was taken aback and didn't know how to respond. My wife overheard the conversation and suggested that she could skip the reception to avoid stressing out my sister about her dog. However, my sister pointed out that the ceremony and reception were held at the same venue, which made my wife feel unwelcome. We felt uncomfortable and kept reassuring my sister that Daisy would be fine, as she had been trained to sit under my wife's chair and stay out of the way. It seemed like their concerns weren't genuine, but rather a way to make Daisy feel unwelcome. We flew back home shortly after, and the next morning, my wife suggested that she should stay home for the wedding so as not to stress out my sister by bringing Daisy. I felt bad for her because it took her a long time to feel comfortable going out in public, and Daisy played an important role in that. It seemed like my family was making her feel unwelcome with her assistance dog. I reassured my wife, but later in the day, I called my sister and told her about my wife's suggestion. I asked her to be more considerate and ensure that my wife's conditions were taken into account. My sister responded by nonchalantly asking, "Yes, and?" I explained that my wife had been prescribed a dog for a reason, and without Daisy, she likely wouldn't go anywhere. My sister brought up the fact that my wife was better during her previous visit and didn't bring Daisy everywhere. I explained that mental health fluctuates, and during the last visit, my wife had just recovered from an illness and was adjusting to changes in her medication. I also reminded my sister that during the last visit, we didn't do much besides going to a restaurant, where Daisy also accompanied us. It feels like I'm constantly trying to prove my wife's medical conditions, even her PTSD, which my sister questioned because my wife hadn't served in Afghanistan. Even her best friend questioned me about it. I'm tempted to share some of my wife's horror stories, but I keep it general to avoid causing secondhand trauma. My sister also mentioned that she had to consider other people's feelings. When I asked if someone had an issue with Daisy attending, she mentioned that her son and his future wife had spoken to her about it. I offered to call them, but she claimed they spoke to her in confidence. I expressed my confusion about her intentions, and she responded by saying she can't handle the stress I'm causing her before hanging up. So, am I the one at fault for calling out my sister's questions about my wife's assistance dog? Am I being too sensitive, as my sister suggested? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Definitely not the idiot. My friend's daughter went through an extremely difficult relationship. I won't give details. When she moved back with her parents, she had severe panic attacks. A service dog was prescribed. The dog went everywhere with her. Service dogs are not prescribed for just any reason. Your wife's dog is a necessity and should be respected as such. I love that you brought up the fact that your sister wouldn't ask a physically disabled person to leave their wheelchair, walker, cane, brace, or hearing disease at home. Comment 2. First off, call your nephew. Don't text or email. Call and talk directly. Tell him your sister implied that he and his fiancée had concerns about Daisy, and you'd like to hear his concerns. I highly suspect that your nephew and his fiancée had no concerns, and your sister is just an AH. If they do have concerns, address them and listen with an open heart. Is someone allergic? Is someone afraid of dogs? Is your sister just a female dog? Also, please thank your wife for her service for me. Now, for the update. Thanks for reading the last post. After that conversation with my sister, things got pretty tense. My wife and I decided to take a break from family events for a while, hoping that some distance might help. We focused on our own lives, trying to find some peace and normalcy, but as you might guess, things didn't stay calm for long. About a month after the party, my sister called me out of the blue. She sounded stressed and asked if we could talk. I agreed, thinking maybe she wanted to apologize or at least find some middle ground. Instead, she told me that her son and his fiancée had decided to uninvite us from the wedding. They felt that Daisy's presence would be too much of a distraction and that it would be better if we didn't attend. I was shocked and hurt. My wife overheard the conversation and was visibly upset. She felt like she was being punished for something beyond her control. This led to a huge argument between my wife and me. She felt like I wasn't doing enough to stand up for her, and I felt caught in the middle, trying to balance my family's expectations with my wife's needs. It was a rough few days, and we barely spoke to each other. I realized that this wasn't just about Daisy. It was about my wife feeling unsupported and unwelcome. In the midst of all this, my wife had a breakdown. She ended up in the hospital for a few days, and Daisy was by her side the entire time. This was a wake-up call for me. I needed to prioritize my wife's mental health over my family's opinions. When she was discharged, we had a long talk. I apologized for not being more supportive and promised to put her needs first. A couple of weeks later, my sister called again, this time with a different tone. She said she had been thinking a lot about our last conversation and wanted to understand more about my wife's condition and why Daisy was so important. I appreciated her effort, but I was still wary. I explained everything in detail, from my wife's PTSD to how Daisy helps her cope with anxiety and depression. My sister seemed to listen, but I could tell she was still struggling to fully grasp the situation. Then came the unexpected twist. My niece, the one who had initially questioned Daisy's presence at her birthday party, reached out to me. She apologized for how things had gone down and said she wanted to make things right. She invited us to lunch to talk things over. My wife was hesitant, but I convinced her to give it a try. During lunch, my niece opened up about her own struggles with anxiety, something she had never shared with anyone in the family. She said she had been projecting her own fears onto my wife and Daisy, and she was genuinely sorry. This was a turning point. My wife and niece bonded over their shared experiences, and it felt like a weight had been lifted. But before I tell you more about that, there's something else you need to know. My sister's reluctance to accept Daisy wasn't just about the dog. It turns out she had been dealing with her own issues. She had been diagnosed with depression a few years ago, but had kept it a secret from everyone, including her own family. She felt ashamed and didn't want to be judged. This revelation made me see things in a new light. My sister's resistance was partly due to her own unresolved feelings about mental health. As we continued to navigate these complicated family dynamics, my wife and I decided to attend a family therapy session with my sister. It was awkward at first, but it helped us communicate better. My sister admitted that she had been unfair and that she was willing to make an effort to understand my wife's needs. This was a huge step forward, but it didn't solve everything. The fallout from these events was significant. My wife and I became more selective about the family events we attended. We prioritized her mental health and only went to gatherings where we felt genuinely welcome. This meant missing out on some important occasions, but it was necessary for her well-being. On the flip side, My sister started to educate herself about mental health. She attended support groups and even started seeing a therapist. This helped her become more empathetic and understanding. Our relationship improved, but it was still a work in progress. Now, let me give you some background that might help explain why things got so complicated. Growing up, my sister and I had a strained relationship. Our parents were strict, and we often competed for their approval. This created a lot of underlying tension that carried into our adult lives. My sister always felt like she had to be perfect, and admitting to her own mental health struggles was something she couldn't bring herself to do. This made her less empathetic towards my wife's condition. My wife, on the other hand, had a traumatic childhood. She grew up in a volatile household and joined the military to escape. Her experiences in the military only added to her trauma, and she struggled with PTSD long before she was diagnosed. Daisy became her lifeline, helping her navigate a world that often felt overwhelming. These personal histories played a significant role in how events unfolded. My sister's need for control and perfection clashed with my wife's need for understanding and support. It took a lot of effort and painful conversations to start bridging that gap. In the end, we found a fragile balance. My wife and I continued to focus on her mental health, and my sister made an effort to be more inclusive and understanding. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for letting my girlfriend's son share a room with his girlfriend? Despite her freaking out, I, 48-year-old male, have been dating my girlfriend Kelly, 50-year-old female, for nearly 2 years. We are currently on vacation with her son Ryan, 23-year-old male, and his girlfriend Emily, 23-year-old female, as well as my sister, brother-in-law, niece, and her boyfriend. To preface this, I know Ryan very well. I've known him for nearly a decade now. I was his coach in high school, and we grew very, very close. He is practically like a son to me. He's also been dating Emily since high school. When we were planning this trip, Kelly said that Ryan wasn't allowed to share a room with Emily. I thought she was joking, but she was not. I know Ryan is sexually active, and I've known from him since he was a teenager. I said fine, and the specific plans were that Ryan and my niece's boyfriend would share a room, and my niece and Emily would share a room. Obviously, that room arrangement wasn't going to last. Everyone was fine with the specific room arrangement. The girls even had a slumber party one of the first nights. Ryan picked up that this was just to make Kelly happy. I handed him his keys and said, "Give the second one to whoever," and he immediately gave it to Emily. My niece did the same in giving her spare key to her boyfriend. This is exactly what everyone thought would happen. Anyway, somehow Ryan had left his wallet in our room last night. Instead of bringing it to him at breakfast or knocking on his door or even sending him a text, Kelly used the key to walk into his room. She saw things she didn't want to see. To be fair, they weren't having intimacy. What was described to me was that they were both unclothed, covered up at least on their bottom halves, but they were snuggled up and he was running his fingers on her back. This sounds like how most loving couples are after being intimate. She was in hysterics. She refused to come to breakfast. I told her that was fine, but she wasn't going to make this into a big deal on our vacation. Emily very sweetly apologized to me and said she knows how Kelly can be, which frankly made me feel terrible. When I went to get Kelly from the room, she was still upset. She expressed to me how upset she was, and I told her to be thankful that all she saw was the snuggling and not the actual act. That made her really upset, and I told her she was overreacting. Ryan is an adult who has been with the same woman for years. She has confided in me before that she doesn't like Emily, but frankly, I've never seen her do anything wrong. She's a bit edgy and Ryan is a bit more preppy, but she's a sweet person who cares deeply for Ryan and vice versa. She called me every name in the book when I told her she was overreacting. She called him a child and accused me of taking Emily's side over her. I'm genuinely concerned. I've even considered the possibility that she forgot to bring some mood-regulating medication because I have never seen her act like this, and I'm being shunned by her for being a jerk. Currently, we're all sitting on the beach while Kelly stays inside being upset. To add, I wanted to add some relevant information that I see asked in the comments. So Ryan and Emily live together and have for, I want to say, 5 years. Ryan paid for his and Emily's portion of this trip. When Kelly brought up them not sharing a room as I was booking it, I thought she was joking and just laughed. It wasn't until we were checking in and I was passing out key cards that she reminded me of what she said. And at that point, instead of arguing about it in the lobby, I said fine and handed people their keys and told them to do whatever they want. I just wanted a drink and eat some fruit on the beach. She is in therapy and is aware of her unhealthy attachment to her son. She does take medications for mood regulation. However, I'm not sure if she currently has them. I think that's all for now. If I see anything else, I will add it. I'm sorry I can't get to all of the comments. There's a lot of them, and I'm on vacation. I posted an update here. Now, for a few comments before the update, comment 1. Not the idiot. Yes, she is overreacting. Ryan is far from being a child. He's a 23-year-old man and has been in a stable relationship for at least 5 years. Your girlfriend shouldn't have even been trying to police them via the room assignments in the first place. Comment 2. You are not the jerk. Kelly's extreme reaction to a perfectly normal and private moment between two consenting adults is unwarranted, and it's understandable that you would try to bring some perspective to the situation. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since my last post. After the incident with Kelly walking in on Ryan and Emily, things took a turn for the worse. Kelly stayed in the room for the rest of the day, refusing to come out. I tried to talk to her, but she was adamant about not seeing anyone. Ryan and Emily were visibly uncomfortable, and I could see the tension building up. My sister and brother-in-law tried to keep things light, but it was clear that the mood had shifted. The next morning, Kelly finally emerged from the room, but she was still cold and distant. She barely spoke to anyone and avoided eye contact with Emily. I decided to take Ryan aside and have a chat with him. I explained the situation and how Kelly was feeling. Ryan was understanding but frustrated. He told me that he felt like he was being treated like a child and that it was unfair to Emily. I couldn't disagree with him. Later that day, we all went out for a boat ride. Kelly stayed behind, saying she wasn't feeling well. On the boat, Ryan and Emily tried to enjoy themselves, but it was clear that the incident was weighing on them. My niece and her boyfriend were also trying to keep things light, but the tension was clear. I felt like I was stuck in the middle, trying to keep everyone happy but failing miserably. When we got back to the hotel, Kelly was waiting for us. She pulled me aside and told me that she wanted to leave. She said she couldn't stand being around Emily and that she felt disrespected. I tried to reason with her, but she was adamant she wanted to pack up and go home. I was torn. On one hand, I wanted to support Kelly, but on the other hand, I didn't want to ruin the vacation for everyone else. I decided to talk to Ryan and Emily again. I explained the situation and told them that Kelly wanted to leave. Ryan was furious. He said that he had paid for the trip and that it wasn't fair for Kelly to ruin it for everyone. Emily was upset, but tried to stay calm. She said that she understood Kelly's feelings, but that it wasn't fair to punish them for being a couple. That night, things came to a head. Kelly and I had a huge argument. She accused me of not supporting her and taking Ryan and Emily's side. I told her that she was being unreasonable and that she needed to let go of her unhealthy attachment to Ryan. She called me every name in the book and stormed out of the room. I was left feeling helpless and frustrated. The next morning, Kelly was gone. She had packed her bags and left without saying a word to anyone. I was devastated. I felt like I had failed her and everyone else. Ryan and Emily were also upset, but they tried to make the best of the situation. My sister and brother-in-law were supportive, but I could tell they were also disappointed. In the days that followed, I tried to keep things together. We went on excursions and tried to enjoy the rest of the vacation, but it was clear that the incident had cast a shadow over everything. Ryan and Emily were distant, and I could see the strain it was putting on their relationship. My niece and her boyfriend were also affected, and I felt guilty for dragging them into this mess. As the vacation came to an end, I couldn't shake the feeling of failure. I had hoped that this trip would bring us all closer together, but it had done the opposite. Kelly's departure had left a void, and I didn't know how to fill it. I tried to reach out to her, but she wouldn't respond to my calls or messages. I was left wondering if our relationship was over. Looking back, I realized that there were signs of trouble long before the trip. Kelly's unhealthy attachment to Ryan had always been a point of contention, but I had ignored it, hoping it would resolve itself. I also realized that I had been too passive, trying to keep the peace instead of addressing the issues head-on. I had let things fester, and now I was paying the price. Ryan and Emily decided to take a break from each other after the trip. They said they needed time to process everything and figure out their next steps. I felt terrible for them, knowing that my actions had contributed to their decision. My niece and her boyfriend were also affected, and I could see the strain it had put on their relationship. As for Kelly, I still haven't heard from her. I don't know if she will ever forgive me or if our relationship is beyond repair. I feel lost and unsure of what to do next. I know that I need to address my own issues and figure out how to move forward, but it's hard when everything feels so uncertain. Thank you for reading. Am I the idiot for refusing to take down my late husband's memorial display, despite my new boyfriend's insecurities? So, my husband passed away late 2018. It was sudden, it was devastating, and I still miss him. He was only 33 and I was 29 when it happened. He had been my best friend for almost half my life, way before it became a romantic relationship that eventually led to us getting married in 2014. Fast forward to today, and I found love again with a new man, 36. We've been together for about 2 years, and 5 months ago he moved in with me. It was going pretty good until a couple weeks ago. This man has always been so patient and understanding. We had a lot in common and would get each other's references to like old cartoons and movie quotes. He laughed at my bad jokes. Every now and then, he'd get moody when he'd want to watch TV with me, and I would get caught up in a painting or project. To be fair, this happens a lot. I don't like watching TV when we could be doing something else, and I have a lot of hobbies and just started a small business. I feel like 1 or 2 movies a month seems sufficient, and it's basically the only activity he ever suggests. I try things like working on something in the same room as he watches something, but apparently it only counts as quality time together if I'm also watching with him. I don't get it, but this was the biggest problem we had until recently. A couple weeks ago, out of nowhere, he started acting very angry and insecure. He keeps bringing up events or statements he says I made months ago and accusing me of hiding things. I know that I haven't done anything I'd have to lie to him about, so even if I don't remember a particular comment I made last February or something, I can be sure that it wasn't anything meant to deceive him or mask my secret activities or whatever. I don't have the time or energy to be in a relationship where I have to hide stuff, and if it came to that, I would rather be single. Back to the main point. In our bedroom, there's like a nook in a corner where I keep my business supplies and a tall bookshelf that I mostly use for general storage. There are several bins and like my sewing machine and of course some books. You can't see any of it from the main part of the room, but I use it regularly. Taking up maybe 1/4 of a one shelf, just under a foot long, I have a place where I display a little urn with some of my husband's ashes, a mug he got me that says wifey, a little stuffed mini doll, and an infinity cube I decorated years ago that says IU. Behind this, there's a picture of my husband kissing my cheek. My boyfriend told me last night that it's disrespectful and unfair to him that I have that up in our room because I'm not married to him anymore. That he and I are now together and he shouldn't have to look at me with another man. I would agree with that if my husband wasn't dead, but he is. Am I wrong for being firm on this? For the record, this whole display is easy to overlook, and he doesn't have anything in that little enclave of the room, so he wouldn't have to see it if he didn't try to. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. The whole, sitting with him while he watches a movie you don't care about, isn't the same as sitting in the same room while you do something you want. It's a red flag. The only people I've ever seen act this way are very insecure men who try to control their partners. Your new boyfriend is needy and insecure, and he's making accusations that aren't true. You will probably be better off without this man in your life. I'm going to suggest that you take your precious memories down and put them away someplace safe. Then break up with him. Good luck. Comment 2, not the idiot. 2. Not. He is unreasonable and insecure. Your husband is deceased. He was part of your life and is still part of your story. Find someone who is more understanding and isn't trying to compete with a dead person. My uncle's first wife passed early from MS. His current wife bakes a birthday cake every year for the first wife's birthday and drives my uncle to her memorial spot. They donate to charities in her name. They have a photo of her up with all the other family photos and some butterfly art. She loved them. Now for the update, thanks for reading my last post. So things have taken quite a turn over the past few days. After my boyfriend's outburst about the display in our bedroom, I decided to stand my ground. I told him that my late husband was a significant part of my life and that the display was a way for me to honor his memory. I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. The next day, I noticed my boyfriend was even more distant. He barely spoke to me and avoided eye contact. I tried to engage him in conversation, but he brushed me off. That evening, I found him sitting on the couch, staring at the TV but not really watching it. I sat down next to him and asked him what was wrong. He finally opened up and said he felt like he was living in someone else's shadow. He admitted that he was jealous of my late husband and felt like he could never measure up. This was a huge revelation for me. I had no idea he felt this way. I tried to reassure him that my love for my late husband didn't diminish my love for him. But he wasn't convinced. He said he needed some time to think and left the house. I was left sitting there, feeling helpless and confused. The next day, he didn't come home. I called and texted him, but he didn't respond. I was worried sick. I didn't know where he was or what he was doing. I started to question everything. Was I being unreasonable? Should I take down the display? But then I remembered why I put it up in the first place. It was a way for me to cope with my loss and keep my husband's memory alive. On the third day, he finally came home. He looked exhausted and defeated. He sat down at the kitchen table and told me he had been staying at a friend's place. He said he had been doing a lot of thinking and realized that he had been unfair to me. He apologized for his behavior and said he wanted to work things out. We had a long conversation that night. He admitted that he had been feeling insecure for a while and that it had nothing to do with me. He said he was struggling with his own issues and had projected them onto our relationship. I told him that I appreciated his honesty and that I was willing to support him, but that he needed to seek professional help. He agreed and said he would make an appointment with a therapist. In the days that followed, we started to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't easy, but we were both committed to making it work. He started seeing a therapist and began to address his insecurities. I made an effort to spend more quality time with him, even if it meant watching TV together. We also set aside time to talk about our feelings and concerns, which helped us understand each other better. One evening, while we were having dinner, he brought up the display in our bedroom again. This time, he was much calmer. He said he still found it difficult to see, but he understood why it was important to me. He suggested that we find a compromise. We decided to move the display to a different room, where I could still see it and honor my late husband, but it wouldn't be in our shared space. This solution seemed to work for both of us. As we navigated through these challenges, I couldn't help but reflect on our pasts and how they shaped our present. My late husband and I had a deep bond that was built over many years. We had our ups and downs, but we always supported each other. My boyfriend, on the other hand, had a different experience. He had been in a few relationships before me, but none of them were as serious or long-lasting. He admitted that he had always felt like he was missing something, and that insecurity had followed him into our relationship. One night, as we were lying in bed, he shared a story from his childhood. He told me about how his parents had a tumultuous relationship and eventually divorced. He said he had always felt like he had to choose between them, and that feeling of being torn had stayed with him. It was an eye-opening moment for me. I realized that his insecurities were deeply rooted and not something that could be easily fixed. Despite these challenges, we continued to work on our relationship. We started to find a new rhythm and balance. I made sure to carve out time for my hobbies and business, but also made an effort to engage in activities that we both enjoyed. We discovered new interests together, like cooking and hiking, which helped us bond and create new memories. As we moved forward, I noticed a change in my boyfriend. He became more open and communicative. He started to share his feelings and concerns without fear of judgment. I also became more understanding and patient. I realized that relationships require constant effort and compromise, and that it's important to address issues head-on rather than letting them fester. In the end, we both grew from this experience. Our relationship became stronger and more resilient. We learned to appreciate each other's strengths and support each other's weaknesses. It wasn't a perfect journey, but it was a real one. And for that, I'm grateful. Thanks for reading. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day. Have a